Life was pretty simple for me. My name is Nickel, and at 28, you'd usually find me in the local library. It wasn't exciting or glamorous, but it was my life. The books were my friends, and the dusty shelves were where I felt at home. I wasn't one to seek attention. I was happy to stay in the background. I lived in a small town where everyone knew each other's business. My daily routine was always the same. Wake up, go to work, and then return to my small apartment filled with secondhand furniture and a pile of books. I didn't have much of a social life, and I told myself I was okay with that. Then, one day, Peter walked into the library. It seemed like an ordinary day, but it wasn't. He was looking for a book and said he wanted something different. His smile was warm, and his voice felt like sunshine breaking through the clouds. "Hey, could you help me find a book? I'm feeling adventurous," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sure, what kind of book are you interested in?" I asked, adjusting my glasses and trying not to get too caught up in his gaze. "I don't know. Surprise me," he replied with a grin, as if he enjoyed the little challenge he had given me. That was the start of everything. We began talking regularly. At first, it was just about books, but soon our conversations moved beyond the pages and into our lives. Peter was different. He really listened, and it made me feel seen for the first time in a long while. One day, he came in looking more determined than usual. "You know, Nickel, you're the most interesting person I've met in this town. Why do you hide in here all day?" he asked, leaning on the counter with a playful look in his eyes. I laughed, a sound that even surprised me. "Well, where else would I go? This town isn't exactly full of excitement." Peter's response was quick. "Maybe you just need someone to explore it with. How about dinner tonight? My treat." I hesitated, not used to this kind of attention. "I don't know, Peter." "Come on, what's the worst that could happen? You spend an evening with a guy who likes your book recommendations. Plus, I promise to make it worth your while. You can show me this hidden gem of a town," he said, his confidence contagious. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. "Okay, sure, but no fancy places. I don't do well with all that fuss." "Deal," Peter said, his smile lighting up the room. "I'll pick you up at 9. Wear something comfortable," Peter said. That night changed everything. Even though I'd lived in this town my whole life, Peter showed me places I'd never seen. He made me laugh, a real, deep laugh I didn't even know I had in me. He listened to my stories, my dreams, and my fears, never once making me feel small or unimportant. As we walked back to my apartment, he stopped and looked at me with a serious expression. "Nickel, I know we've just met, but there's something about you. You're different from anyone I've ever known. You're real, and that's rare in a world full of fakes." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. "Peter," I started, but he gently placed a finger on my lips. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see you, Nickel. I see who you are, and I like what I see." Peter had always been the bright spot in my day, making everything seem better with his kindness and care. He made me feel seen, calling me beautiful, kind, and smart things I didn't really believe about myself. His warmth made the idea of forever seem not just possible, but something I wanted. When he asked me to marry him, it felt like a dream. "Marry me, Nickel. I can't imagine my life without you," he said, his eyes full of sincerity. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I breathed out, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. But before we could dive into wedding planning, there was one important step left: meeting his parents. Peter gave me a heads up, a sort of warning. "My folks have pretty high standards for who I bring home, but don't worry. They're going to love you once they see how amazing you are," he assured me, though his words did little to calm my nerves. I was a mess before the meeting, tearing through my closet for something that looked modest yet dignified. It felt impossible to find the right outfit. Peter, on the other hand, was completely calm, almost as if the outcome of the meeting didn't bother him at all. "You're overthinking it, Nickel. Just wear what you're comfortable in," he said casually, which only made me more nervous. The day finally came, and I picked out a simple blue dress that I hoped was just right. As we drove to his parents' house, Peter seemed more interested in the music on the radio than the fact that I was about to meet his parents. "Are you sure they're going to like me?" I asked, needing some reassurance. They'll come around. Just be yourself," Peter said, glancing at me briefly before focusing back on the road. His relaxed attitude felt out of place compared to the nervousness I was feeling. As we walked up to the door of Peter's childhood home, my heart was racing. His earlier warnings played in my mind, making me imagine the judgment I might face. The door opened, and Peter's parents greeted us with expressions that were hard to read. The dinner that followed felt like a minefield. Peter's parents asked me questions that seemed more like an interrogation than a casual chat. "So, Nickel, Peter tells us you work at a library. Do you see yourself doing that long-term?" his father asked, his tone suggesting he didn't think much of my job. I struggled to find the right words, trying to sound confident. "I love working there. It's fulfilling in a way I can't quite describe," I said, hoping my enthusiasm would win them over. Peter stayed unusually quiet throughout the dinner, offering little support as I faced the barrage of questions and subtle criticisms. It felt like I was on my own, with Peter just watching from the sidelines. On the drive home, the silence in the car was heavy. I couldn't help but feel disappointed, not just in how the evening went, but in Peter's lack of support. "I thought you said they'd warm up to me," I finally said, my voice tinged with hurt. Peter shrugged, a gesture that only frustrated me more. "Give it time, Nickel. They just need to get to know you better," he said, but his words didn't make me feel any better. After a few more dinners that felt like interrogations, it became clear that Peter's parents weren't my biggest fans. They seemed to see me as some kind of gold digger, which couldn't have been further from the truth. I was never interested in Peter for his money. Truth is, I never cared about that at all. I didn't really know much about it until he mentioned it one evening. "My parents are a bit old-fashioned," he said. "They worry about strange things like money and status." One night, Peter came home looking more serious than usual. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, avoiding eye contact. That's when I knew something was wrong. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "It's my parents," he started, finally looking at me. "They're insisting we sign a prenup." "A prenup?" The word felt strange and bitter. "Peter, you know I don't care about your money, right?" He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know, and I don't care about it either, not when it comes to us. But they're really pushing for it. They think it'll protect both of us or something." I was hurt, no doubt about it. It felt like his parents were already expecting us to fail. But I loved Peter more than I cared about their approval or some silly agreement. "Fine," I said, sharper than I meant to. "Let's sign it and get it over with. Your money, my money, whatever. I just want you." Peter looked relieved, and part of me resented that. "Thank you, babe. I hate this as much as you do, but it's just a piece of paper. It won't change anything between us." So we signed it. Some lawyer his parents knew drew it up, making sure neither of us could touch the other's stuff if things went bad. It felt like we were signing a statement of distrust before we even began, but I pushed those thoughts aside. I was in love, and love was supposed to conquer all, right? Our wedding was simple, just the way I wanted: close friends, an intimate ceremony, and a promise of forever. I moved into Peter's place soon after. It was a nice house, not too fancy, but it felt a world away from my old apartment. Peter's parents lived nearby, and I soon realized that meant surprise visits that seemed more about checking up on me than anything else. Life with Peter started off like a fairy tale, but it didn't take long for the shine to wear off, revealing the harsh reality underneath. The change wasn't sudden, but the signs were there, slowly chipping away at what we had built. His mother, Julia, was the first crack in our perfect picture. She would drop by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house like she was taking inventory. "Remember, this is Peter's house. Everything here is his, she'd say. I tried to stay calm and replied, I know, Julia, I'm not here for your son's things. I love him. She scoffed, love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Just remember, if you ever leave, you leave with what you came with, nothing. One day, she walked around the house, pointing out every piece of furniture, every appliance, every little item that belonged to Peter. See this couch? It's Peter's. That painting? Also Peter's. Just remember, if things go south, you have no claim to any of it, she said with a sickly sweet tone, as if she enjoyed putting me in my place. Peter's father, Frank, wasn't any better. He and Julia acted like they owned our house. When they visited, they would demand coffee as soon as they walked in, then complain that it was too weak or too strong. They'd sit in front of the TV, expecting me to serve them. Get us some chips, will you? And maybe wash those clothes piling up in the corner while you're at it, Frank would say without even looking at me. The worst part was that Peter never defended me. He'd laugh along with them, adding his own jabs. Yeah, she's still learning how to do things right around here. Give her time, he'd say. I felt like I was losing my mind. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else, someone cruel and dismissive. Do you even hear yourself? How can you let them treat me like this? I'd confront Peter after his parents left. Babe, they're just set in their ways. You know how old people are, he'd shrug it off, making it seem like I was overreacting. They don't mean anything by it. Plus, you know we're on their dime. Can't bite the hand that feeds, right? That line felt like a slap in the face. So that was it, I was just the freeloader, the girl who married into their little empire and had to play by their rules or get out. My job at the library, which I loved, was a joke to them, just another reason for them to look down on me. The days blurred together, each one just like the last, until one ordinary Thursday when everything changed. I was at work shelving books when I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, doubling me over. This wasn't just stress, it was something more, something worse. Then, everything went black. I knew I was in the hospital, the smell of antiseptic made that clear. Lying in that bed, I couldn't help but feel like I'd hit rock bottom. I was alone, in pain, and not a single message or call from Peter. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, there was a knock on the door, and in walked someone I never expected. Nickel David? The man at the door was dressed in a suit and holding a briefcase, looking completely out of place in the sterile hospital room. Yeah, that's me. Who are you? My voice was weak, tired from the pain and all the disappointment. I'm Adam Smith, a notary. I have something important to discuss with you, he said formally, but there was something in his eyes that made me want to listen. I motioned for him to go on, curious despite everything. It's about your great-uncle, Larry David. He passed away recently, and, well, you're his sole heir, Nicole. He left you an inheritance. The words didn't make sense at first. Are you sure you've got the right person? I haven't seen him in 14 years. Adam nodded. Quite sure. He was a private man, but he always remembered you and wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Lying there, feeling a mix of confusion and anticipation, I watched as the notary got ready to explain the details of my great-uncle's will. He cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and laid out the documents in front of him. Nickel, your great-uncle was a man of considerable wealth. He left you quite an inheritance. We're not just talking about cash, though there's plenty of that $35 million, to be exact. Adam began, his voice calm and steady. I blinked, trying to grasp what he was saying. $35 million? I echoed, my voice trembling. That's right, he continued, unfazed by my shock. But there's more. You're also inheriting shares in several large companies. These aren't small investments. They're significant stakes in some of the most stable and profitable firms out there. My mind was racing, trying to understand the enormity of what he was saying. Owning parts of companies I'd only heard about on the news felt like a dream. And then there's the property, Adam added, flipping through the papers. An old, large house in one of the most prestigious areas. It's not just any house, Nicole. It's a mansion with acres of land and a lot of history, and it's all yours now. I tried to picture the house, the kind you only see in movies. It was overwhelming, to say the least. And don't forget about the antique car, Adam added with a slight smile, as if he knew how I'd react. It's a classic, fully restored, and in perfect condition. A collector's dream. I couldn't help but chuckle at how surreal it all felt. An antique car, too. What am I going to do with that? I barely drive as it is. Adam's smile grew. Well, it's yours now. Maybe you'll take it for a drive occasionally. And there's also the furniture and paintings in the house, genuine antiques, some of them centuries old. Your great-uncle had a taste for the finer things in life. The room suddenly felt smaller and the air thicker as I tried to process everything he was telling me. So I've inherited a fortune, a company, a mansion, an antique car, and a collection of art and furniture. This is unbelievable. It's all yours, Nicole. Your great-uncle wanted to make sure you were well taken care of. He must have seen something special in you. Special? I didn't feel special at all, especially lying in a hospital bed after the worst few months of my life. Yet here I was, suddenly a millionaire many times over, entrusted with a legacy I didn't even know existed. Thank you, Mr. Smith. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, feeling a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and a huge sense of responsibility. We'll take it one step at a time, he assured me. I'm here to help you through the whole process. Right on cue, my phone buzzed, and Peter's name flashed on the screen for the first time in days. Ignoring it, I turned back to Adam. What happens now? We'll need to process some paperwork, but the inheritance is yours. Your life is about to change, Nicole. And change it did. After the unexpected windfall, Peter and his parents suddenly acted differently, as if they'd turned over a new leaf. Their daily visits to the hospital were like scenes from a sappy movie. Peter, who hadn't bothered to check on me before, now hovered constantly, adjusting my blanket with a concerned look. How are you feeling today, love? He'd ask, his voice dripping with sweetness that didn't reach his eyes. Peter's mother, Julia, was even more dramatic if that was possible. Darling, I'm going to make your favorite lasagna when you get home. Just you wait, she said with a wide smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was all too much, too sudden, but I played along, smiling weakly and thanking them for their care. Still, a nagging suspicion gnawed at me, telling me to look beyond their act. One day, after their usual visit, I gathered the strength to slip out of bed and quietly follow them. My heart pounded with every step as I hid behind a corner, listening to them when they thought no one was around. The first thing I heard was their laughter, harsh and jarring. Can you believe how easy this is? She's so gullible, she's eating right out of our hands, Peter said, a chuckle escaping his lips. Julia's voice was sharper, more calculating. Make sure she has a baby with you, Peter. Once that happens, she'll never be able to leave us. Then we'll have a real grip on her and her fortune. Their cruel words didn't shock me. Disappointment, yes, but surprise? Not at all. They had shown their true colors, and I was done pretending they were different. Silently, I returned to my hospital bed, their mocking words fueling a fire inside me. They saw me as nothing more than a way to secure their future, but I wasn't going to play along with their plan, not anymore. As I lay in that bed, a clear and firm plan began to take shape in my mind. I was going to turn the tables on Peter and his scheming family. They thought I was weak, but they were about to see just how wrong they were. When I was discharged and returned to the house, I felt like a stranger in what was supposed to be my home. Peter and his parents were there waiting, their faces full of fake concern and eagerness. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension and expectation. Peter was the first to break the silence. "Babe, you're home. How are you feeling? We've been so worried about you," he said, his voice sweet but with a hint of greed beneath it. Ignoring the lump in my throat, I looked him in the eyes, seeing the man I once thought I knew. I'm feeling better, thanks, but we need to talk, all of us. I spoke, my voice steady even though I was churning inside. Julia, ever the actress, stepped forward, her hands clasped like she was praying. Of course, dear, we're here for you, whatever you need. It was now or never. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I'm filing for divorce, Peter, and before you ask, no, you won't see a dime of my inheritance. The room fell silent, as if all the air had been sucked out. Peter's face turned pale, his calm facade cracking to reveal the panic underneath. Divorce? But why? I thought we were happy, he stammered. Happy? I echoed, the word leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. You, your mom, and your dad have made my life miserable. You've treated me like a servant, not a wife. And now, suddenly, you care about me because I'm worth something to you. Peter struggled to find words, but Julia quickly jumped in. This is nonsense. We've always treated you like family. You're imagining things, dear. I rolled my eyes and pulled the prenuptial agreement from my bag, waving it in front of them. This is what saved me. You thought you could play me, but I'm not the knave girl you thought I was. Frank, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice a mix of anger and defeat. You'll regret this. We're your family. No, I replied firmly, you were never my family. A real family doesn't treat one of their own like dirt, and then suddenly act sweet when money's involved. I'm done here. Moving into my own place felt like a breath of fresh air. The apartment was small and cozy, a stark contrast to the life I'd left behind. It wasn't just a new home. It was my declaration of independence, my fresh start. The phone calls started almost immediately. Peter, his voice dripping with desperation, was the first. Nickel, please, you've got to come back. We can work this out. I know we can. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done, and no amount of begging would change that. Peter, it's over. I'm not coming back. You need to accept that, I said firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. Not long after, Julia called, her tone a toxic mix of anger and guilt. Ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, you owe us nickel. You're making a huge mistake. Owe you for what, Julia? For making me feel like nothing more than a burden? No, I don't owe you anything. Goodbye. Hanging up on her felt like shedding a heavy weight, a final cut from the ties that had bound me to a life of misery. The divorce was a relief, a clean break from a past that had nearly consumed me. I heard about the fallout between Peter and his parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The prenuptial agreement they insisted on was now tearing their family apart. With my great-uncle's inheritance securely in my name, I found a new sense of purpose and generosity. I donated a significant portion to charities that mattered to me, supporting causes that could make a real difference. But the bookstore became my true passion. It was a cozy haven for lovers of old and rare books, and it allowed me to reconnect with the world on my own terms. My journey hadn't been easy, filled with challenges and heartache, but standing in my bookstore, surrounded by countless stories, I knew I had found my happy ending. It wasn't just about moving on from Peter and his family's manipulation. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I loved. Here's to new beginnings, I toasted to myself one quiet evening after closing up shop. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, filled with possibilities and the promise of newfound happiness.